The movie opens with an intense scene in which the Clayton brothers, a group that hunts down illegal immigrants in Arizona, are in hot pursuit of a group of migrants. However, one of them manages to escape. Marisol, a talented graffiti artist, is thrilled to learn that her cousin Genaro has arrived from Mexico. It turns out Genaro was the one who successfully escaped the officers. Marisol's family welcomes him warmly, and they bond over dinner. Later, Genaro joins Marisol and her younger brother, Kiko, for a ride in her friend Ramon's car to explore the city. However, they are soon pulled over by the police. Marisol urges Genaro to stay calm as the officer asks for identification. When the officer inquires whether they are all legal residents, Kiko quickly steps in and assures him that they are all Americans like him. Satisfied, the officer lets them go. Upon arriving at the park, Marisol meets her friend Tate, and they set off to explore with Kiko. Meanwhile, Ramon and his friends nearly get into a heated fight with some college students over a game, fueled largely by racial tensions, but the situation is diffused before it escalates. Afterward, Gavin, one of the students and a talented football player, decides to leave the group for a walk alone, since he's afraid of heights. His girlfriend Chris isn't happy about it, but she reluctantly lets him go. While wandering, Gavin comes across Marisol and is instantly captivated by her beauty. Marisol notices him staring, and for a moment, she can't seem to look away either. Sensing the moment, Tate and Kiko urge her to run before he has a chance to approach. She follows their lead, leaving Gavin stunned. Despite their attempt to escape, Gavin doesn't give up and follows them to their hiding spot. Eventually, Marisol faces him, and the romantic tension between them is undeniable. Before long, they are locked in a passionate kiss, but Tate and Kiko interrupt, pulling Marisol away. Meanwhile, Gavin's sister Amber witnesses the kiss and is clearly displeased. Marisol, Tate, and Kiko rush back to Ramon and the others, but Gavin continues to follow. When Ramon realizes that Gavin was part of the school group earlier, he and his friends immediately ambush him. However, Gavin's friends step in, and the situation quickly escalates into a brawl. As tensions rise, Marisol and the others try to break up the fight. Eventually, park security intervenes, ejecting Ramon and his crew, Marisol included, despite Gavin's attempts to defend her. Back home during dinner, Amber reveals their encounter at the park to their parents, Earl and Trisha. Despite Gavin's objections, there's clear tension between Latinos and Caucasians, as both sides seem to strongly dislike each other. Earl becomes furious that Gavin defended a Latino, but Gavin doesn't see the issue, insisting that everyone is human. Amber, however, clearly has a problem with it, making Gavin storm away from the table. Meanwhile, at Marisol's home, Genaro gently scolds her about her encounter with Gavin, but she doesn't see anything wrong with it. Still, she promises not to see him again. However, keeping that promise seems impossible, as Marisol later finds herself sketching Gavin. Someone is definitely falling in love. The next day, as she works on a new graffiti piece, Ramon, who has feelings for her, approaches. He tries to get her to spend time with him, but Marisol turns him down and promises to make time later. As he's about to leave, he notices she's painting Gavin. Instantly upset, he confronts her, but she dismisses it as nothing and points out his own face on the wall. Undeterred, he tries to initiate an intimate moment despite her resistance, forcing Genaro to step in and intervene. The next day, Gavin convinces his friend Luke to go with him to the mall where Marisol works. However, unsure of which section she's in, he decides to wait in hopes of spotting her. Unfortunately, they never see her. Gavin doesn't give up, and on the third day, he finally spots Marisol and immediately approaches her. Tate notices him first and alerts Marisol, prompting her to excuse herself from her uncle, whom she works for, and sneak out with Gavin. Intrigued by her, Gavin takes the chance to properly introduce himself. Just as their moment unfolds, Marisol's uncle calls her name, forcing her to cut their conversation short. Before she leaves, Gavin can't resist pulling her into a deep kiss. With so much excitement, Gavin shares the encounter with Luke. Meanwhile, Marisol's uncle scolds her for slacking off at work. Gavin returns to her section and discreetly reveals a sheet of paper with his social handle. Despite her uncle's warning, Marisol quickly steps aside to take it without being noticed. Later that evening, Gavin and Luke enjoy a football game at home when Earl joins them. Their match is interrupted by an advertisement for the Clayton brothers, a group that hunts down illegal immigrants in Arizona. Irritated, Gavin tries to leave, but Earl forces him to stay back. He even expresses interest in joining the group, boasting about his firearms and deep resentment toward Mexicans. His hatred stems from losing his contracting job, which he blames on the influx of illegal immigrants. The next day, Gavin and Marisol start texting and quickly set up a date to meet, much to Gavin's excitement. As planned, they meet the following day, with Gavin bringing Luke along while Marisol brings Tate and Kiko. After introductions, Gavin takes Marisol to his special place, leaving Tate and Kiko with Luke. He leads her to the mountains, where they take in a breathtaking view. From their vantage point, Gavin points out the border, and Marisol decides to sketch it. Impressed, he asks about her talent, and she reveals she has been drawing since childhood. As they talk, the page where she sketched Gavin unexpectedly comes up. Surprised, he takes a closer look, but Marisol becomes flustered and quickly tries to cover it. He manages to catch another glimpse, and the sweet moment soon leads to a passionate kiss. Suddenly, a gust of wind scatters Marisol's papers, and they scramble to gather them. In the process, Gavin's shirt gets snagged on a branch, tearing slightly. On their way back to the others, Marisol, on a whim, offers Gavin her shirt right there in public. She quickly throws on her jacket, leaving Gavin stunned by her spontaneity. Upon returning, they find Luke and Kiko at odds, and Tate quickly pulls Marisol to leave. Back home, Earl becomes furious when he sees Gavin wearing a shirt with an image of a Mexican man. Fed up with his father's prejudice, Gavin storms off to his room. It's clear why he prefers the mountain. It's his escape. Over the next few scenes, Marisol and Gavin's relationship blossoms as they spend more time together, reveling in their love. Eventually, Chris learns about their romance and is furious. She confronts Gavin, but he brushes her off, making it clear he's moved on. Meanwhile, Marisol and her friends go on a picnic, but the outing takes a dark turn when Ramon tries to force himself on her. Furious, she slaps him hard before storming off. Then there's Chris, who refuses to believe anyone can dump her, which seems hilarious because she's been cheating on Gavin with Luke. While chatting with Tate, Marisol spots a rabbit, and they attempt to catch it. Suddenly, Ramon takes a shot at it, enraging Genaro, who argues that someone could have been hit by mistake. The two quickly get into a heated argument before Ramon storms off. The next day, Gavin takes things a step further and invites Marisol to his house. In his room, she curiously looks around at his belongings. The moment soon turns romantic, leading to a passionate kiss. However, things take an awkward turn when Trisha and Amber unexpectedly walk in on them. Gavin introduces Marisol, but Trisha plainly ignores her. Instead, she warns Gavin about Earl before leaving with his grandfather. They're both lucky it wasn't Earl who caught them. A few days later, Marisol invites Gavin to a party her community is hosting, and he decides to go, bringing Luke along. Marisol is thrilled to see Gavin, and they enjoy dancing together. However, trouble soon brews when Ramon spots them. Jealous and enraged, he picks a fight with Gavin. The situation escalates quickly when Luke tries to attack with a sharp object, turning the party into total chaos. As people rush to intervene, the Border Patrol suddenly arrives, demanding papers from everyone. Panic spreads, and Ramon and his gang instantly flee. Unfortunately, Genaro is caught and arrested because of this. Marisol's father, Nacho, desperately pleads Genaro's case, but his words fall on deaf ears. Meanwhile, Gavin and Luke are also arrested by the police. Gavin is furious when he learns that Luke was the one who called the Border Patrol. Later that evening, Earl arrives to bail the boys out, using his connections with an old classmate, who, ironically, is Latino and now a police officer. Turns out Earl can be cordial with Mexicans when he needs a favor after all. Back home, Nacho angrily storms into Marisol's room, declaring that her relationship with Gavin is over, which only adds to her frustration. Meanwhile, Gavin faces his own battle at home, as Earl berates him about Marisol, leaving him devastated. A few days later, Marisol and Gavin meet at the mountains, where she reveals that her family wants them to break up. Frustrated, she questions why whites and Latinos harbor so much resentment toward each other, especially given the deep-rooted racism in Arizona. Gavin tries to comfort her, reminding her that not everyone is like that. Some people just find it easier to hate than to change. Later that evening, Nacho visits Marisol in her room to share an update. Genaro has been sent to Nogales. He's wired him money to help him cross the border again. Marisol feels guilty, believing it's partially her fault. Then, Nacho drops another bombshell. He plans to send her to Sonora to stay with her grandmother. Marisol is anything but pleased, feeling sad and hurt that her father would send her away just because she's fallen in love with a white boy. Despite the disapproval, Marisol can't seem to let Gavin go. She watches him practice the next day, and later breaks the news about her impending departure. Gavin is devastated. He can't imagine life without her, and she feels the same. Desperate to make the most of their time, they decide to go on a camping trip to be alone together. In the intimacy of their tent, their passion deepens, and they take their relationship to the next level. Afterwards, Gavin walks Marisol back to the mall, sealing their moment with a passionate kiss. But before they can part, Ramon and his clique ambush Gavin. With no one to intervene, he is brutally beaten while Marisol's uncle forcibly drags her away, leaving her devastated. Back home, Trisha tends to Gavin's injuries, gently telling him that Marisol isn't meant for him. But Gavin refuses to accept that. No matter what anyone says, he won't give up on her. He insists that running away from true love would be a betrayal of himself, something Trisha herself once taught him. Over the next few days, Earl and Luke decide to join the Clayton brothers on a hunt for immigrants at the border. Unfortunately, Renato is among a group of Mexicans when they get ambushed. Gunfire erupts, and when Luke spots Renato, he shoots him down without hesitation, fueled by hatred. Renato is rushed to the hospital, but when his family arrives, they are denied access because he is an illegal immigrant, despite Nacho's desperate pleas. At the hospital, Gavin crosses paths with Marisol, and she tearfully informs him of what happened. When they try to comfort each other with a hug, tensions flare. Earl and Nacho get involved, pulling them apart and escalating the situation. The next day, the family is finally allowed to see Renato. The mood is somber as they watch him lying unconscious in the hospital bed recovering. Tate arrives, but instead of offering comfort, she blames Marisol for everything. Marisol is devastated. She thought Tate, of all people, would understand her love for Gavin. The next day, Nacho has had enough. He seizes Marisol's phone and furiously informs her that she's leaving for Sonora in 2 days. Later, Gavin stops by her house, calling out her name, but he's turned away. He doesn't see her at the window, calling out for him in return. The following day, Tate visits Marisol and apologizes for her harsh words at the hospital. She's saddened by Marisol's impending departure, and Marisol pleads for her help in reaching Gavin. With Tate's help, Marisol calls Gavin from her phone and explains her situation. Gavin confesses that he can't live without her, and Marisol suggests they elope. They agree to meet at a warehouse by sunset before ending the call. That evening, Marisol quietly packs her belongings and sneaks out of her room. Meanwhile, Gavin packs up his things as well. Amber tries to stop him, but he admits he can't stay in the house any longer. After a brief hug, he walks away, unaware that Amber immediately takes out her phone and begins making a call. Later, Ramon angrily drives to Tate's house, demanding to know Marisol's whereabouts. At first, Tate refuses to answer, but when Ramon draws a pistol on her, fear forces her to give up the location. His friends, realizing how far he's willing to go, choose not to follow him, but Ramon is undeterred. He speeds off alone, fueled by rage. At the warehouse, he confronts Marisol and Gavin, insisting that Marisol come with him. Gavin refuses to back down, and the confrontation quickly escalates into a brutal fight. Marisol, desperate to stop them, tries to pull Ramon away, only to be struck by him in the chaos. Unwilling to back down, Ramon pulls his pistol, aiming it at Gavin and Marisol. The atmosphere is thick with tension when Luke suddenly arrives, drawing his own weapon on Ramon. Gavin pleads with Ramon to put the gun down, but Ramon doesn't listen. Then, in a split second, a shot rings out. Unfortunately, Marisol is the one struck by the bullet, collapsing to the ground. Everyone is devastated as Gavin cries out, begging her to stay alive. He yells at Luke to call an ambulance, but it's already too late. Marisol takes her final breath right there. Gavin clutches her lifeless body, overwhelmed with grief. He can't believe what's happening, his cries filled with unbearable pain. Meanwhile, Ramon, broken by his actions, stumbles away from the warehouse. His unhealthy obsession has eventually cost Marisol her life. A service is held in her honor, the atmosphere heavy with sorrow. Her loss was preventable, a tragic result of deep-seated hatred and racism between whites and Mexicans. Marisol's only crime was falling in love with a white boy in the country where she was born. But the world refused to let it happen. Now she is laid to rest, and Gavin is left heartbroken, carrying the weight of her loss. Oh, and Renato successfully crosses the border back.